All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Wegman. I am the Accenture Amazon Web Services Managing Director. I manage Accenture's Amazon Web Practice and Asset Development team. So thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come and talk. And hopefully today, with my two colleagues, Chris Scott, who's my asset development lead, and then Tom Leszewski, who's with Amazon Web Services, who we work very closely with. Hopefully we'll give you guys some insights on how we've gone down our cloud journey and how we've gone down our migration path to AWS over the last several years. So hopefully we can give you some good insight that you guys can take back to your businesses and help make that journey. As you guys saw today, Amazon continues to really push the envelope, really introduce new services that are really exciting for enterprises, and that's excited us, and we've been working with them very closely for the last several years. So first of all, for a few of you who don't know who we are, Accenture is a global management consulting, technology and services company. I'm sure you've seen a logo somewhere around here, maybe in an elevator. So hopefully you kind of at least know what the greater than sign is. But at the end of the day, we have about 305,000 people in our organization around the world. So we're definitely consider ourselves an enterprise company. At the end of the day, we help our clients become better, right? We help them, maximize their performance, develop and implement technologies. And we deliver strategy and digital and all the hot things. And at the end of the day, our tagline is high performance delivered. So there's not a single one of these things that doesn't have cloud in it somewhere, right? Because cloud is everywhere now. It's not just something that a few of us are doing and it's cool and it's fun. It's everywhere. So our journey to AWS started way back in 2006 when Amazon was first starting out. So we started using Amazon EC2 in our innovation lab and S3. So we really looked at it when it was first coming out, and for innovation work it fit really well, right? We could spin stuff up very quickly, pay by the drink, get rid of it when we were done working on our innovation and move on. As things moved on, 2008, we started really seeing the demand, far use wider in our company. So we signed our first enterprise agreement with Amazon in 2008, and that gave us our first kind of enterprise experience. Having it not credit cards anymore, being under a single account, it started making that feel a little bit more comfortable with Amazon. In 2010, we had started moving workloads in 2008, our dev test and that, to Amazon. By 2010, it was becoming pretty much a standard for a lot of our projects to use Amazon in some way. But it really was only dev test. So we were very strict about what we allowed on Amazon. We didn't allow any of our client data. We were very strict on it. As things moved on, we started getting closer into 2012. We really saw the demand start picking up, as you see by the line here. And we really started building some assets around Amazon, both to use internally and then also to help our clients. Our clients were starting to ask us, how do I use Amazon? What do you have kind of pre-built that we can pick up and take? We really need that stuff. And then we released one of our first managed services on Amazon. So for us, it's about managed services. It's about business services. That's what we try to sell to our companies or to our clients. So cloud is perfect for that. So in 2012, we introduced a consumer products goods application that was built on Amazon. We actually presented it here, I think in this room last year, to a much smaller crowd, which is nice. We showed how we were able to take an application that was written for on-prem use and put it out on Amazon and get reliable performance and be able to scale it to meet some of the biggest consumer good companies in this world. So that really kind of set the pace and set the bar for our applications. 2013, we became a premier partner. And in 2014, we really kind of continued that growth. So we introduced ACP, which is Accenture Cloud Platform. We introduced our third version of that, which really focused on our lessons learned on managing enterprise clouds and making that migration to them. We started leveraging AWS for our ACP. So for us, ACP was a major development project, the third version, and we picked AWS because it allowed us to do rapid development on AWS. So, and then we started moving production workloads to AWS. So, we started moving more stuff, more production workloads. Like a lot of you, we started with a dev test and we got to production. One of the things, we didn't go do a lift and shift mentality. So we never ran a program inside of Accenture to go and take a number of servers and do a lift and shift, at the IaaS level or at the EC2 level. We really focused on applications. We built our analytics service on it. So here shortly, we'll talk about our analytics service, but we provide that as a service to companies. So we took things like Redshift and developed our analytics platform on it. So again, pay as you go, great model. And then we released our AWS migration framework. So we took a lot of the experiences that we've had over the years. We've done data center migrations for years. We've done, at one point VM migrations, right? So we took a lot of that experience. We looked at it from an application perspective and put together the framework that we're going to talk a little bit about today and some of our lessons learned from that. And then we introduced our Amazon COE. So in our COE, what we found is there's still a lot of things that need to be figured out, especially in the industry spaces. So we serve multiple industries. And while Amazon's made a lot of great progress, there's still industry challenges that we need to get over. So we worked on those. That's why we built our COE. And the first thing that came out of our COE was our migration strategy. And right now we're moving Accenture.com to AWS. So, obviously we believe in the platform. We're moving our website and our public image there. Again, for a lot of the same reasons that, a lot of web applications have been moved there over the years. And then, as I said, we're continuing to build our business services on AWS. So I'll spend a couple minutes, on our capabilities and solutions, and then I'll get these guys up here and they can talk about it. But we've worked with a lot of different industries, as I mentioned. We talk about electronics retailer. We've helped them, do cloud bursting and things like that. We've done global pharmaceuticals, gas and oil, you name it. We've done some work in there. And I talked about the marketing solution. That was a great example. And then later on in the presentation, I'll talk about some work we did at Discovery Channel, and they're moving their applications onto AWS. So, how do you define your cloud journey? So to me, this is one of the most important things. You got to have a journey, you got to have a path. Will you set the map out and will you follow that map step by step? No. But you need to have at least a little bit of plan. You got to have the end in mind before you sit down and start this. So, what we see is, some models, some different approaches, like dev test. A lot of you guys have done that. I'm sure most of our clients have. We have. It's a good way to start. Move your dev test there, get that experience, turn it off when you're not using it. Really get your developers used to using it. New app and greenfield. So new app development. You guys have, this is where the bread and butter of a lot of the Amazon stuff is at. Building new apps from scratch. Utilizing IaaS, what we kind of call IaaS plus. Take advantage of the really cloud benefits. And then you can augment what you have, right? So all this, it ends up being, kind of three different approaches. Do you integrate and, build new applications, integrate back into your old ones? Migrate, pick things up and move them, or go all in. Our experience is no one does any one of these alone. They do multiple of them. And, it's really important to figure out which applications you're going to put into these different methods. So, what do we hear from our clients? Within the last month, we've seen a significant amount of questions around migrations. And I think if you look around this room, obviously you have those questions. If you look at the agenda for this event, right, multiple people are up on stage talking about migrations to Amazon. So it's definitely picked up in the last 6 months. And you guys are looking to move thousands of workloads, right? And you're trying to figure out what workloads to move. And really trying to come up with that plan. So some of the concerns we hear, you have seen is security. I'll be quite honest, that one seems to have gone away. over the last several years. There's enough security, with VPCs, with different encryption and all that kind of stuff. For most clients, they've gotten comfortable with that, and that's gone away. Operational impacts. How do I run it when it's there? We see some of our clients who don't have a lot of internal IT left. They've gone through some type of outsourcing project, and they don't have the people around, so they try to figure out, how am I going to run this stuff? So definitely we see clients looking at different managed service providers. There's lots of them out there, and trying to figure out what's the right one. And you really got to kind of know what you're looking for before you step out there and look. Lack of resources, both budgets being tight and not having a lot of resources out in the market, right? It's a very hot market, no different than other things were several years ago. But there's it's hard to find the resources. In one, can they even do cloud? Do they know how to do it? That type of stuff. Older platforms, a lot, still mainframes, still AS400s, all that around. Don't kid yourself, right? You're not going to move it. Don't even spend the time thinking about it. If you want to get out of that data center, go find a colo and move it and be done. Don't waste your time. And that's what our customers are like. Well, how do I migrate that? If it's that important, it's going to stay around. As we talk about our methodology, look at moving it to to Java or .NET or something like that, to a platform that actually will run on the cloud. So that's a big concern. Complexity of migration systems and interfaces, right? A lot of tools out there, a lot of different people talking about different ways of doing migrations. All of them have a couple good parts. We haven't seen one that's kind of good end to end. So you may have to cobble a couple of them together, and Tom and Chris will talk a little bit about that. But at the end of the day, for what we see for enterprises, the first time we walk in the door, they say, well, we're going to do it for cost savings. That's why we're doing this. We're going to save a lot of money. We see with a lot of enterprise customers, they have best-in-class pricing, right? It's not about cost. At the end of the day, it comes down to being agility. So to me, that's the number one thing. And if you're doing cloud for anything else, you're thinking about it wrong, or you're not going to get out the benefit that you get. So you really got to look at the value drivers, because you've got to go and have that conversation up the chain and explain what you're doing and really get the business buy-in. If it's an IT-driven project, our experience is it doesn't go so well. If you really got to get the business bought in, you got to get your application developers bought in. Don't kid yourself. Don't think it's just going to be this simple migration and you're going to be able to cut millions or hundreds of millions of dollars out of your IT budget. Be responsive to the business needs. I mean, that's what the cloud's all about, right? We saw everybody around here talks about innovation, how I can build stuff faster, and that's what it's about, and that's what your business is going to want. And last, cost savings. It's the last thing on the list. If you get it, great. That's what we all want from the infrastructure itself. We want the cost savings and the business agility more, and that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. So with that, I'm going to invite Chris Scott and Tom up. They're going to spend a few minutes talking through kind of what are the migration paths we have, and what's the methodology that we've worked together to put together and take to our clients. Chris?
Thanks, Chris. Hey everyone, I'm Chris Scott. I'm a senior manager out of Accenture's Boston office. As Chris mentioned, I lead up our solution architecture and asset development work. One of the key things that we've been focused on in the last few years is developing this migration framework. And I put together this kind of subway map type diagram to illustrate all the components and things you need to think of as you migrate to the cloud. There's some key decision points as you move through the process. You need to think through, are you refactoring your applications and moving your applications to the cloud? Or do you want to move your infrastructure to the cloud? It's a bit of a decision process. When you move your applications, you have the option to re-platform them. You can recode them, move them to modern languages. You may have Power Builder type applications. So you decide you don't want those living around anymore, and you want to migrate those to modern languages like .NET. So you have the flexibility to do that as you work through your migration framework. And also, as you move your infrastructure, you have options that you can lift and shift the infrastructure over. There's a lot of great tools in the marketplace. There's tools provided by AWS that you can use to do that and make it a very effective process. So Accenture has been doing migrations for many different years. We started doing mainframe migrations back in the day. We've gone to application migrations, and we've taken this framework that we've established over many years and applied that to cloud. We have a lot of great expertise and a lot of tools that we've used to develop this framework. And we've divided it into 5 key steps. The first is defining your cloud strategy, and I'll get into a little bit why that's important. The next is doing your cloud assessment, looking at your portfolio, discovering the applications you have in your landscape, and then architecting your AWS environment. You want to know what applications exist out there to make sure that they're compatible with the architecture you're going to build in AWS. And Tom's going to talk a little bit about how to architect your environments. Next along the process, you do your actual migration. So there's lots of different tools I mentioned that you can use, and you need to pick the right tools to be successful. And the last part of all of this, and one of the most important parts of migrating, is understanding how you're going to manage your destination environment. One of the key things, and what Chris talked about before, some of the key challenges that we hear from clients, first off was security. The second is operations. So how do I operate everything that's now moved to this cloud environment? Can my existing tools that I've used for 10 or 20 years potentially in the past still work in a cloud environment? Potentially some can, some probably won't as well. So I'll go through a few key steps as we talk about the migration framework in each of these. We don't have too much time, so we won't drain each of the different areas. But starting off with cloud strategy, why would you build a cloud strategy in the first place? If you know you're already moving to AWS, what's the value of putting together the strategy? Yeah, the key thing is business alignment. And there's a few key points up here that you can read. It really boils down to aligning your IT services with the expectations and what the business has, expectations of IT. Once you develop that, you also have a gauge to understand how successful you are in your migration process. If you didn't define your strategy and your value drivers and why you're doing the migration, you can't determine how successful you were after you do that migration. One of the other key points is you're developing your strategy is also looking at TCO. And a lot of folks think TCO, they automatically think cost savings. Well, TCO isn't necessarily cost savings. I think it's an important point when you're developing your model is to look at how much does it cost to deliver a server on premises. And there's a lot of key factors that go into what your costs are. You may take into physical space in your data center environment into account. Your electricity and your fuel, power your generators may also be a key cost that you have. And as you rationalize that, you can compare what does it cost in your cloud environment. At some points, you may get cost savings, but in the end, you can illustrate how much it costs to operate your new environment compared to your old environment. And that also helps you develop your billing and your show back and your charge back to your customers as you understand how much the estimated costs are. So moving on to the next phase in the process, after you develop your cloud strategy, one of the key things that you need to do is defining your assessment approach. How are you going to discover all of your applications and assess how they fit into the cloud environment? So the first thing you may want to do is you have some applications in mind that are probably great cloud candidates. So you want to include those. You may have some documentation about those applications as well that you want to include. You may have a CMDB in your environment where you can take some of the application portfolio and understand what's out there. You also can send a questionnaire to all of your business users to understand a little bit more about their applications. And once you've gathered all that information, you've done your discovery, you want to assess your application portfolio. You want to understand what applications are best fit for cloud, what's going to give you the value the fastest, and what are things that you may want to push off to the future. You may not want to migrate them right now. You may want to gain experience doing your first migrations and then tackle a little bit later on. In the next slide, I'll talk here a little bit about what is your assessment criteria as you're going through your application portfolio. Some of the key things in the best practice we've seen working with our clients is first to identify what would disqualify your applications from moving to the cloud. And typically we go through, maybe 10 or 15 questions that you want to have in there, and they're probably very business-focused questions. For instance, data privacy. Do you want to put PII, PCI data into your cloud environment? Some clients choose to, and others accept the risk of doing that and putting it in a public cloud environment. And you can use encryption. Some clients say that we will accept PII and PCI data in the cloud if it's encrypted. So that could be one of your assessment criteria as well. You also want to look at the support for your environment. Some vendors don't support their software in cloud environments, so it's important to understand that before you assess your application and start migrating into your cloud environment. There's also some technical things. You may not want to move databases that are 50 terabytes onto a DBMS or MySQL system. Perhaps with new services released today, you can do that. But you need to look through, there's some technical challenges and limitations in your cloud provider in AWS that you may want to work around, and you don't want to migrate those applications yet. And some other key things to point out is, interesting things as we've worked with our clients in the past, is some software companies use USB licensing, like USB dongles attached to your servers. Well, if you have that, it's probably not a good candidate to move to your cloud environment, because it probably won't work out there very well. And as you define that assessment criteria, the next step is planning your migration. There's a few key steps in doing that. You want to bucket your applications together. Understand which are the applications that are going to drive the value the fastest. What are the easy things to do? You may want to say all like-for-like migrations, you're going to move to your cloud environment right away. You may want to remediate a few of your applications, and you'll do that in the next step. You also want to do POCs and pilots. You may want to choose 10 or 15 of your applications to move over first so that you get the experience in migrating those applications. Tom?
Thanks, Chris. So one thing I want to add about the assessment piece, and we talked about migrating thousands of workloads. So imagine if you're going to have thousands of workloads and you have all these people to go and ask about what they have on their application, right? What does your application consist of? They either don't know, or they'll tell you and they're not lying, but they just don't know. Or they miss some things, right? They don't tell you some important pieces. So what we're working with Accenture, and I love this idea, is that we're driving automation into this whole process. This isn't all about throwing hundreds of bodies at a migration effort. It's all about driving automation, just like we want to drive automation with our platform. So automating the process of discovery even. So being able to go out there to all the systems, maybe put an agent on the system, or maybe do some discovery agentlessly, and figure out what's out there, right? So you can eliminate moving parts, you can eliminate the manual process. The second piece of this is the architecture. And so people look at a migration and they just think of, got to migrate everything over, but what's the end architecture going to look like? So when you talk about network, it's not just about moving a bunch of VMs, right? You can't just point it over here and say, I'm going to move a bunch of VMs over. It's like you have to think about the network, right? So in a lot of cases, it's going to be VPC. It might be direct connect. You know, how you're going to configure that. Direct Connect isn't out of the box, so you got to figure out how you're going to your setup. If you're going to do that yourself, you're going to have Accenture do it. You're going to have someone else do that for you. How about account management? Are you going to have one account with multiple accounts? You're going to have one account, multiple VPCs. Are you going to have one VPC for development, one for test, one for production? You're going to throw everything in one VPC? If you have multiple VPCs, then you have to start using VPC peering. So all these things play into each other, right? Am I going to use IAM? Am I going to have one master account and then have IAM users? Tagging, right? So tagging is an important piece. If you're not familiar with tagging, get familiar with tagging. Tagging is both for billing and chargeback, as well as for allowing, say, something to be tagged as production. So if something is tagged as a production and that IAM user is a developer, they cannot stop an instance. They cannot terminate an instance. So you've got to think about your tagging strategy. Governance and billing, so cost management. We have things like Trusted Advisor. There's also third-party tools out there. ACP, which was mentioned earlier, also does billing and governance for you. And then in terms of monitoring, a lot of times you can use the platforms you have now. So if you're using Tivoli or CA or some kind of management and monitoring platform, you can use that, but you can also use CloudWatch, right? But that's a transition. So once again, getting back to the point of it's just not moving a bunch of VMs. You have to think about your network. You have to think about your account management. You have to think about your monitoring. You have to think about your logging of your application. We have CloudTrail now, which allows you to aggregate your logs from an application perspective, not just from an AWS perspective. So here's just some high-level ones where, here's a mapping. And keep this in mind. When you see this slide, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in context of the next slide as well. Right? So we talked about a like-to-like, what's called a lift and shift or a rehost. So you just take what you have and you move it over. So if you're going to do a like-for-like, and see, I was walking around the booth, and I would have some other vendor, but there's F5, big IP, right? So if you have F5 as a load balancer, we have on our marketplace the capability to run F5 on our platform. So that's like for like, right? So you just take the load balancer that you have on premise and move it over. right? So you don't try to move to our elastic load balancer. With storage, obviously you're going to be using EBS. Well, what are you going to do if you have a massive storage array, right? So you might have to use something like ClusterFS or Zadara in order to support that on AWS. So there are some areas that are going to have to be filled in with third-party providers, even if you use a like-for-like type migration. So if you go on the bottom of the slide and say this is like-for-like or rehosting, lift and shift, whatever you want to call it, that's where you take what you have. So if it's big IP, F5, it's NetScaler, whatever you're using for a load balancer, that's what you run on AWS. You don't change the operating system. You don't change the application code. You don't change the tiering. You don't change the scaling configuration. You just take what you have and move it over. The nice thing about that is you don't have a lot of moving parts. So your testing is minimized, but what you don't do is you don't get a lot of cost savings out of that, as much as you would as if you did the replatforming, which I'll touch on. So like for like is at the bottom of the scale. And so that doesn't mean you can't use some AWS features. Like say, take for example, CloudFormation. If it's not application intrusive, where you don't have to change your application, there's nothing around using CloudFormation that forces you to change your application because it's deploying the infrastructure. So an example of using an AWS service, even in a like-for-like migration, is CloudFormation. The next step up is minor remediation. So you do some minor code changes. And this example is perhaps using something like autoscaling. So you're not changing any code, right? You're changing your application infrastructure deployment using autoscaling. You might have to take a look at whether you're using something like WebLogic or WebSphere, whether it can really autoscale. And you might have to take a look at your licensing model as well, whether it can be used in an autoscaling environment. But you're not changing code once again. You may be using ELB. You're taking those F5 load balancer I rules and moving them over into Elastic Load Balancer. You're using things like autoscaling, not touching the code. Then you can make significant remediations. And what this may be is you have a data warehouse on-prem, and you're using a column-level database, and you want to move it into Redshift, right? So you're actually changing a platform. So you're using some other vendor, you're moving it into Redshift, you're going to have to change your SQL. You're going to have to make changes to that application. So now you start talking about using more of our stuff. Another example is RabbitMQ, or a message queuing system on-premise that you then move to SQS. So there's going to be API changes that are in your application. So now you're starting to talk about using. Another example is using something like a BEPL engine, a BEPL engine, BEPL execution engine, and moving that to SWF. So using that to our simple workflow service, right? You're going to have to make some code changes there, but you get a lot of benefits. It's a lot less expensive to run something like SQS or FWS than it is to run some legacy BEPL system. And then the next one is replatforming. So what if you have a Power Builder application, a client-server application, or an application that doesn't scale horizontally, it only scales vertical. It's a very monolithic application. So you want to move that over. Client-server applications like Power Builder aren't made for the web, right? They're made to run on one computer. They're not made to scale out horizontally. What if you have a COBOL app? How many people have programmed on a mainframe or COBOL? Wow, see, we got a few of them out there. So I used to code assembler a long time ago. And what are you going to do with an assembler app? You know, what are you going to do with an application that runs on a mainframe? So you're going to have to recode a lot of things and perhaps change it, you know, from COBOL to Java or Power Builder to Java, and there are some tools vendors out there. The other thing about doing a automated migration that I did want to mention, and Chris both alluded to it, is that we do have partners out there that we're working very effectively with. There's AppZero, which is Windows-based migration, so taking things like Windows 2000 and or Windows 2003, sorry, and moving that over into AWS. Racimi does Linux-type migrations. Cloud VLOX does migrations as well. So we want to automate just not the assessment piece. We want to migrate the entire migration of that, whether it's Windows or Linux-based platforms. Chris, do you got anything to add for me? I didn't interrupt you before. You can interrupt me, though.
No, I think that's great. I think the key thing in migrating at scale is automating as much of the process as possible. I think that's the key thing. And using those tools that you mentioned is definitely one of the ways to do it. In moving along to the next step in our migration process, it's the migration phase. So using that automated tool to migrate your workloads, you may be migrating your applications, you may be migrating your infrastructure. There's a few different ways to do that. One of the key areas that we see, and a lot of times as we've been working with our clients and they start their initial migration journey, one of the areas that they don't really focus on is testing and certifying their applications. It's a really important process as you migrate all your applications, is ensure that the application is going to perform in the destination environment in AWS effectively. You also want to look at performance. A lot of times our clients don't understand how their applications are performing on premises. They haven't done performance testing. If you haven't done performance testing, how can you evaluate how well it's performing in AWS if you don't have a baseline? So it's important to create those baselines, understand the performance of your applications, and tune your applications as you migrate them over to AWS. And finally, in the cutover and decommissioning phase, you want to get support finally from your users. You want sign-off on those applications. You want to make sure that they're comfortable with them moving into the target cloud environment. Tom, any additional thoughts?
No, I think testing is highly underrated. Testing is like a big component of the migration. I think you have to test a lot.
Yeah,
but if you do a like-for-like migration, your testing is going to be less, right? If you're going to do a whole big re-platform, if you're going to make changes to the application, your testing is exponentially going to go up. It all goes back to the point of the fact that you don't get as much value out of our platform if you do a like-for-like. But you get a quicker time to market.
Absolutely. One of the key things is, since you have to do so much testing, there's a lot of work involved. There is a lot of automated things you can do, but there is some testing that you're going to need to do. And if you scale and want to do thousands of applications, you're going to need to back that potentially by a lot of people. A year ago, we were hearing from our clients that they want to migrate 30, 50, or a couple hundred workloads to AWS. Now we're talking to clients that want to migrate 10,000 or 30,000 workloads. In order to do that, you need a lot of people to help with that testing process and some of their assessment. That's one of the key areas that Accenture, where we're differentiated, is we have a global presence. We have delivery centers around the world, and we have almost 195,000 employees that can help with that migration process across our delivery centers. In the next phase in our process as well, it's understanding how you're going to manage your
questions at the end, I think. Yeah.
How you manage your destination environment. You need to define what's your existing operating model. I put up a few key things that we see in our clients' operating models that you need to think through in the impacts to each of those areas. To touch on a few, what are your processes? Perhaps you have some vendor management processes and how you procure Amazon. You set up new environments. You may need to ensure that you're in alignment with that in your various processes. And what about your tools as well? Your monitoring, your backup, various tools. You want to make sure that those work in the destination environment. And also, as you look at your operation model, it's really different what the level of impact is and how much planning you need to do. We've seen that organizations with lower maturity in their IT groups, they don't do as much automation, they don't do any virtualization, have a tougher time in operating a cloud environment. Although if you're highly virtualized, you do a lot of infrastructure as code in your existing environment, maybe you run a private cloud and you want to bring public cloud and AWS into it, it's going to be a lot easier journey for you. To think through, we've also developed a heat map, and it's hard to see a few of the items here, but the point is, this is kind of a map of all the operations processes that we see from our clients. And almost every process is going to be impacted by your journey to cloud. So you want to make sure that you're doing that assessment, looking at all of your operations, and ensuring what is going to be impacted, and making sure you have a plan to remediate that. Chris? He's going to talk a little bit about how we manage cloud environments internally to Accenture and how we can offer this as well to our clients.
So before I do that, why don't you guys stay on stage? What would be your thoughts around? There I am. So what would be your thoughts around automation as part of the migration process? You talk about automating the migration process, but what about should these guys focus on getting automation out of the, after they've migrated, right? Creating cloud formation templates, that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. If I'm going to move it once, do I need to think about automation? I get this question a lot, so I'm curious what you guys would say.
Well, from an AWS perspective, I mean, you saw in the keynote this morning, right? I mean, we're doing so much in the enterprise, continuous integration, code deployment. I mean, we're taking our process that we learned from Amazon on how to deploy code at high level scale, and then also how to do continuous deployment. I mean, we do deployments every hour on our Amazon, and we're taking all that expertise that we got and put it in there. I would be a little bit cautious on it. I mean, my particular approach would be CloudFormation is a great starting point, and I think everyone should use CloudFormation because it allows you to do that infrastructure as a code type deployment model, right? But I think going to a whole, unless you're using Chef and Puppet and using bootstrapping to begin with, it might be a little bit too much for you to bite off right at the beginning. But definitely dip your toe in the water with CloudFormation, take a look at Beanstalk, OpWorks, and take a look at continuous deployment. And if you're using Chef and Puppet, I mean, yeah, it's easy to sort of start using a lot of our tools. But if you're not familiar with doing continuous deployment, it could be a little scary and a little bit too much for you to bite off at the beginning.
Okay. So I'll quickly spend a few minutes. You know, one of the biggest things we see from after we get the stuff there is how am I going to manage it? You know, at the end of the day, we see a lot of our clients, they'll get, a couple hundred instances into AWS, and then they're like, uh-oh, now what do I do? Or someone's built an application, they turn over to IT and say, you need to run it, and by the way, I need, the best SLA you have because now it's mission critical to my business. So, we did see this in Accenture, and that's why we created the Accenture Cloud Platform. So for Accenture Cloud Platform, like I said, earlier, it's our our management plane, right? It helps us manage the cloud, and in our case, we do some other clouds, right? I won't use their names here, but we obviously we obviously have some, and we have our internal cloud. So what we did with this is we really try to focus on 4 kind of areas. How do I get control of shadow IT? How do I know what people are out there doing, right? I don't want to impact the innovation process. I don't want to make them go through some lengthy request process. That does no good. That's no one's going to do that. They're going to go straight to the cloud. How do I govern that? How do I make sure that they're staying within the boundaries of what I've allowed them to do, right? I need to bill and charge back, right? We all have our GL systems. We all have to get billed back and recoup our money someplace, right? And then, how do I ensure the business processes or the IT processes have been put in place? How do I make sure the stuff's patched? How do I make sure it's backed up, right? If I allow the developer to do that, that's great in dev and test, but when I get to production, I need to be able to do that. So with Accenture Cloud Platform, we kind of brought that all together. And one of the biggest things we found is we couldn't keep up with Amazon. We took the traditional approach. We started calling APIs. We wrote a web portal. Hey, we got it, right? This is going to be easy. And we found out really quickly we can't keep up, right? And Amazon doesn't, every time we'd sit down with Amazon, they're like, don't take our customers away from our portal, right? That's what we want them to have access to every service out there. So in 3.0, we kind of changed our approach. We kind of went to a discovery model. So instead of you having to go and go through our portal to create everything, we did some of the initial account allocation and allocation and stuff through our portal, and then you can go to the Amazon console and do what you want, right? We'll come behind the scenes and discover it and make sure that it's getting patched, it's getting it's living up to the policies and operations side of things. So we found this is a much better approach. We find that we can do more things this way, and we're not impeding the innovation cycle. Oops, wrong button. So, we worked with a global hospitality company, and their challenge was exactly this. They had started using Amazon. They'd started building a lot of their future applications. And if you know the hospitality industry, right, a lot of innovation going on, right? It's all about trying to keep their customers. So they started building some stuff. They got it out there, and all of a sudden it was production, and they had to now support it and live up to the SLAs their customers wanted. So we took Accenture Cloud Platform, we put their brand on it, and helped them turn it into their platform. So we were able to give them that billing, we were able to give them that management, and actually make sure that they were able to support those applications that they put on that platform.
A key point about billing, Chris, my experience so far, I had managed Accenture's billing for all of our Amazon instances, and it was a real pain. If any of you are used to the detailed billing reports, there's like 15 million lines potentially in your billing reports. So it's really hard to manage that. So you absolutely need a billing tool to help you charge back and show back that information to your business. And especially if you're migrating thousands of workloads, it's only going to compound the problem.
Yeah, and my experience is that, most of you guys have to add something onto that bill. So, we get the bill from Amazon, you break it down, you got to recoup your cost as well, so you have to put something on it. So, doing that in a spreadsheet only goes so far. You got to start using something to help you. And, there's some good tools. We picked a tool to help us embed that in our platform, and, we see a lot of value in doing that. I mean, would it take you like 2 weeks to do our bill?
Yeah.
Before? Now it's down to, a couple hours?
Yeah.
So, so from a discovery, just from a credential standpoint, we helped Discovery Channel. They were in a situation where they had to be able to scale quickly and be able to support all the new shows they're putting out there. So we worked with them. We did this assessment approach. We did the appraisal. We looked at their current infrastructure. We developed a plan, and then we carried out the necessary development and integration work and testing work to make that happen. So just as Tom kind of said, we went through that process. We set figured out what the environment was, designed it, moved the applications, and tested them. What they saw out of that, their costs, they came down 73%. Because in this case, they needed to scale. They needed to grow quickly. One, they went to being able to get a site up in a day. That's awesome. If you think about it, new TV shows, how many go out there and they're gone within a day, right? After one episode, they're gone, or a new one comes along. So they needed to get those sites up very quickly. Scaling became automatic. And then at the end of the day, the great feature with Amazon, no capital. So they were able to, not go out every year for capital. So, a couple quick last things, and we'll have a few minutes for questions. But, as you think about it, what do you need to do in your migration journey? One, define the business needs and drivers, right? Understand what your business is doing, right? Don't make this an IT project. It won't go so well, right? You got to get those businesses in. They got to do testing. Don't make it an infrastructure project. Make it make it an IT and a business project. Establish your cloud use cases. What are you going to move there, right? What aren't you going to move there? Make those decisions so you don't sit there and have to have a conversation time and time again on what I'm going to move. Develop your TCO model and your cost estimates, right? At the end of the day, someone's going to ask you to justify the project, right? None of us get free checks or blank checks anymore. Make sure you can justify your project and your total cost of ownership. Define your cloud strategy, assess your applications portfolio, and move your applications. Don't do it by yourself. Get the application owners involved. Understand the impact of your organization. So once you get the stuff in, make sure you know how to run it and manage it. If you got to pick a tool, go get tools. If you got to get a vendor, go get a vendor. And then apply the governance and control. Right. At the end of the day, you want to control this stuff. So with that, we got about 3 or 4 minutes left. Any questions for these guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've developed a tool within Accenture called IT X-ray, or our discovery services, and it can spider out kind of in an environment and discover services, applications and servers out there, or we can target it against a few servers and collect all the metadata about those instances. That's been one of the key things for us, and I think there's other tools in the marketplace as well. But going out there, a lot of times CMDBs aren't complete. So you want to make sure that you have some sort of tool to spider out in your environment, or at least understand the interfaces between all your applications and ensure those become part of your assessment list.
So look at your expense reports. So that's how we did it, right? When we started, we found 1,000 individual accounts, right? So we started cutting off expense reports, getting our finance group, hey, you can't charge it anymore. And that's how we found most of them. And then, it was very effective when no one got paid for their Amazon bill every month.
Two quick questions. One, when you work with companies who have to get regulated on workloads to avoid that,
yeah, I mean, I think it's to me, it's, and Tom and Chris, I'll let you guys answer as well, but to me, is you got to build in your process, right? You got to go through that. I've seen a lot of common companies work together to help kind of encourage the regulators to sign off, right? If you can come up with some common architectures. The certifications are step one. but you got to put your own stuff around it. So that heat map for a regulated company is much redder, or more red, I guess is the right English, more red for, for regulated companies. So build that in your plan, account for that time, and don't wait. Like it's a journey with them as well, right? They got to understand the cloud, and I think if you read a lot of the articles in Europe and stuff like that, the process they're going through. So you guys anything to add? That's good. Okay. Got one more minute. Anything else? Okay, guys, thank you very much for the time. Hopefully you got something out of it. Thank you.